All right, folks. Next up, we got a wonderful conversation with about a project that you should be aware about. But I'll let Cliff do the introduction because this is more in his wheelhouse.
Well, it is kind of funny that you would say that, Justin. You're very kind, but there's a way to make films where you're inside the studio system and you're beholden to a lot of, you know, powerful factors in that equation that kind of push you or constrain your creative efforts. It's always been the complaint of the creatives, the ones that I've known. The other route, the more preferred route of making films, is when you do it independently. Do it with somebody else's money and then make it your own way without those constraints. And believe me, this is the way, to borrow a Mandalorian phrase. And we're so delighted to have a writer and director, filmmaker extraordinaire who's coming to visit with us all the way across the pond and talk about some really cool independent documentary films that he's made. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome Jon Spira. Hello, good sir, and welcome to our little show
Thank you
here.
so much for having me.
The man who made Hollywood Bulldogs, an amazing examination of the British film industry and their stunties. That's right, they're stunt performers and how they all got into it, how the birth of the stunt performer industry at that moment in British film history that exploded and made magic happen, the Bond films. And don't forget that it wasn't really Harrison Ford, flying through those helicopter blades, or those were British stunt performers. And this is Jon Spira's specialty, giving us insights on the film industry. He also did a wonderful Star Wars documentary called Elstree in 1976 that focused on the background performers and extras who worked on the very famous movie Episode 4, A New Hope. You know that one. You've heard of that little film. And now, right now, coming out the gate with a big, exciting Kickstarter that is only 1 week away from finishing, he's given us a wonderful portrait of none other than Sir Christopher Lee, a new film that he's made, and he's here to tell us some beautiful details about the life and deaths of Christopher Lee. Jon Spira, take it away.
Hi. Yeah, this is where we are right now. We have made the film, The Life and Deaths of Christopher Lee. It's all finished. It's all ready to go. And what
Yes.
we're doing right now with the Kickstarter is we decided to do the physical release ourselves. We decided that, to be honest, there's not a great thirst out there for releasing kind of niche documentaries of physical media right now. And the companies that are prepared to take that kind of risk tend to do kind of fairly bare bones releases. And we who made the film, me and my producer Hank in particular, we're just real physical media fans and collectors and geeks. And we said, let's just have fun. Let's keep the rights ourselves. Let's do it on Kickstarter, and let's just go crazy with it, and let's make a Blu-ray which has got loads of extra features, and then do a ridiculous box set which comes in a coffin and
Oh, that's delicious. What great planning.
all
And I
kinds
love
of
it.
stuff. Well, we're collectors ourselves, so it's one of those things where it's like, what would we want on our shelves? And once we'd worked out the kind of dream for it, we just did it. I've done Kickstarter several times before on different projects.
Mm.
I know how much fun it is. I know how difficult it is, but I know how much fun it is. And yeah, we this week, 2 days ago, we smashed it. We smashed the target, so it's 100% happening. We've got all kinds of crazy goodies, and yeah, we wanted to tell the Lord of the Rings fans because it's
Oh,
Christopher
yes.
Lee.
Absolutely. I find it interesting to see how the Kickstarter ecosystem is transforming the way that many creatives are getting their work out there. And I mean, board game designers and publishers, they're financing and publishing on their own, just like filmmakers are publishing home video and Blu-rays through the Kickstarter ecosystem. Tell us, what is the ultimate advantage, you think, with this?
I think it's a tool like anything else. So
Hmm.
you can be fooled by Kickstarter because you can go on it and you can see that some films and some board games, like you say, have gone on and made 3 million you
Out of
know,
nowhere.
and
Yeah.
it's like this complete surprise, and you go, wow, this is amazing. What Kickstarter gives you is it gives you a level playing field. It gives you a start. Okay, so Kickstarter is a very prominent website. It's something which people naturally look at by themselves to a certain degree. But it's a tool. If you want a successful I mean, this is now my 6th crowdfunding campaign.
Wow.
And that's been between films and books. I've done 3 books and 3 films on it, I think, and they've all been successful. But they've been successful because if you commit to doing a Kickstarter, it's a huge amount of work. You have to take, I mean, that literally this month, the campaign runs for 1 month, and I've had to take the whole month off work, and I'm working full time on
Oh
it,
dear.
and I've been preparing for it for 2 months. So a lot of people think they can have an idea, just put it on Kickstarter, and magically people will give them money, and it's not that simple at all. You have to already be in touch with most of your audience. You have to understand your audience. You have to understand that what you're creating is a product, and it has to appeal to people. So there's a lot of stuff in there. It can give you the opportunity, like I say, to make millions of dollars, but equally, it's not an end to itself. You can't just put an idea up there and expect the public to come and back it. It doesn't work that way. But it's one, and like you say, it gives you freedom. And like you were saying earlier on, there are people who work within the system, and there are different levels of the system. And I'm certainly not disparaging of the system as a whole, because I've worked within it to different degrees throughout my career, and I've been lucky at times to have really great people supporting above with that. But right now, we're at a point where the film industry is going through a very big change and a very big problem, which is that we are now almost completely dependent on the streaming platforms for all of our revenues now. Cinema is dying, and physical media is changing a lot. I would say it's certainly, I wouldn't say it's on its way out, but it's no longer mainstream. So you have to be very careful with what you're doing there. And the streaming platforms are all in trouble right now. So one place where all of our work could sit is a very kind of a very precarious place right now in general. Most of them started with a lot of money and a lot of kind of fanfare, and have kind of failed to turn a profit. And what you're finding now, almost across the board, I mean, a lot of the smaller streamers are just closing down. They're just going, our last 2 projects were actually backed by BritBox US and BritBox UK, and they seem BritBox UK has now been completely subsumed, and BritBox US, it seems to have changed. I'm not sure what's going on there.
It has been. I fear for Shudder sometimes, but I'm glad that they're still very strongly operating on their own and have such great content, especially with independent horror. Let's get into that. Let's talk about Hammer. Let's talk about the history of the Hammer Studios.
Well, you were just
I'm
mentioning.
excited to really get into the details here about your new film.
Hammer's amazing. Sorry,
I just went to Kickstarter. I just went to Kickstarter right now. I'm not logged in. I'm just an anonymous logged out user. You're on the front page of
Kickstarter. We made front page now.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, you have.
Oh,
right there.
God.
So you've got a few days left to this Kickstarter that's happening, and I guess their algorithm is highlighting where you're at.
That's
great.
Amazing. I was hoping that we might get somewhere near the front once we passed the goal, but I didn't expect us to be right on the front page. That's amazing.
Well, wow. Congrats. I guess this is breaking news.
That's great.
I'm not
talking about myself, but it deserves to be, because I don't understand how there's never been a documentary about Christopher Lee, not a proper documentary,
I wonder myself too, why some of my compatriots behind Ringer's Lord of the Fans didn't think of this years ago. We should have thought of this. It's such an obvious and wonderful, wonderful subject that deserves real delicious In
some
depth.
of the most popular constantly viral videos, like I see the same clips of Christopher Lee every 6 months go viral, of like him on This Is Your Life, and you know, all those meme accounts saying, did you know that Christopher Lee had to tell Peter Jackson how a man truly dies, you know?
Yeah.
So there's like an intense uh meme appreciation for the life of Christopher Lee, like even more so, I think, than his characters.
Do you
So
know, I have a secret suspicion that the reason Peter Jackson gave us an autograph is because he's bored of that anecdote being endlessly circulated around. I think that's like the only Peter Jackson anecdote that ever passes around in terms of Christopher Lee, is that he was told the noise that a man makes when he's stabbed to death. But his interview was amazing. So he's given us lots more really interesting Christopher Lee stories that hopefully will go on to be meme worthy in themselves. You know?
Now that's what I wanted to ask you. When we were putting together Ringers, we were just walking around and asking all kinds of people, would you like to share your reflections on the whole Lord of the Rings fandom, especially, you know, the relationship between the 60s and rock and roll and this cultural movement that happened at a certain time. And everybody from David Carradine right on down to Peter Jackson and everyone in between was willing, very happy to say, oh, yeah, I remember when, you know, back in Berkeley, blah, blah, blah. And the stories just profusely came out of people. Did you find that the case? That you said, folks, let's talk about Sir Christopher Lee. And did you find that people were just really eager to engage?
Really eager, and
Oh, good.
and it happened kind of very quickly that it came together, and we got fantastic people. And in fact, the only frustration about making the film, which I know was a shared frustration, is that there were some huge hitters who we could not schedule interviews with, who
Oh,
wanted to do interviews, and you know, we were right up until we had to deliver in March, right up until the week we delivered, there was still one A-list Hollywood director who literally was kind of, his people were phoning us going, he really still wants to do this. We were talking to them every few days, but it was like, you know, we can't do this. This has come up. You know, he wants to do this. He wants to do this. So, you know, there were, and there was a huge Hollywood star as well who really wanted to do it. But again, we just couldn't. It was one of those things. These people have these schedules where they'll suddenly go, "Are you available today?" And you'll go, "No, I can't get a crew together in an hour's time and
in an
meet you for
hour.
20 minutes." You know, but yes, people really wanted to talk about him because he left, as far as I can see, an indelible mark on everyone he met.
Mm.
He was loved and admired, and I say that as two very separate things. The people who knew him truly loved him, and the people who maybe didn't know him as closely truly admired him. And one of the things that I found really kind of heartening and fascinating to learn was that he was somebody who was completely egalitarian. He would talk to anybody. He treated everybody as his equal, and he would sit down. He loved being on film sets, and he was just as happy talking to a runner as he would be talking to the director. He didn't differentiate between people. He really didn't see, and from someone who came from genuine aristocracy, he didn't see that divide in people. He would talk to anyone. He enjoyed talking to anyone. He enjoyed just being with people, and so he's left a legacy of genuine affection, and that was something which really kind of came out in the film. And in fact, one thing that I wasn't expecting is the end of the film is a lot more emotional than you would expect, and
Mm.
it's very moving, actually, the end of the film. So, and we got to places that I did not expect to get to, and it was wonderful. And in fact, one of the things I really wasn't expecting, and in fact wasn't even prodding for, um, is we interviewed his son-in-law, who he was very close to, who worked with him as well for a bit, and he unprompted, he basically told us the full story of the day that Christopher Lee died, like the circumstances in which he died, and it was incredibly moving to be on the set that day. When it finished, there was a big kind of intake of breath when the camera kind of went off. And I remember looking around and seeing the camera crew like wiping their eyes.
Oh,
Because it was
wow.
so emotional. It's you know, and the film is an emotional film. The film is not. I mean, like you say, if you Google Christopher Lee on the internet, you will get a list of disparate facts about him, all of which are incredible, and most of which are true. There's
Hmm.
some apocryphal stuff out there, but most of those crazy lists are completely true. Really weird stuff like he met Rasputin's killers and he witnessed the last ever guillotining in Paris. You know, really all of that strange stuff is true. And you could make a documentary which was just this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and it was just kind of a factual thing. But what we ended up doing is making more of an emotional portrait of him, and kind of finding out who he really was and what was going on under his skin, and I think that's a lot more. There's a lot more meat on the bones to something like that, and I think as a viewer, you come out of it feeling with just with your mind going. You know, it makes you think, and it makes you think about yourself, and it makes you think about life, and those are the things that I enjoy from films, and that's what we've done here.
I love that you can discover new insights into your subject without knowing you're going to arrive there. You
Oh,
you begin as a filmmaker, as a documentarian, you start somewhere and you always surprise yourself in ending up with new places that you and new information you've discovered that actually does recontextualize what you're trying to present as a filmmaker.
and that's, you know, I mean, that's not, I don't think that's true for all documentary filmmakers, because I think you have two approaches. I think you either go into something having fully researched it and saying this is the story I want to tell, which
Hmm.
means you will ask leading questions and you
Hmm.
will already have a firm idea of what your film is going to be. We do the almost the opposite of that, which is we're completely open through the whole thing, and we find that the film presents itself to us as we go along. And
Indeed.
what I always say is that I always consider my films to be postcards from the journey that we went on making them. So
Mm.
for a year we'll immerse ourselves in a subject and we'll meet fantastic people and we'll have long conversations with them. And as we're doing that, the film presents itself to all of us who are working on it, and we all kind of collaborate. I know that the director is traditionally seen as, like, you know, an auteur kind of thing. I've never looked at it that way. I work with really brilliant people who all bring something to the table. Um,
Yes.
my producer Hank is one of the most creative people you'll meet. He's a you know he was in a band. He's a poet. He's a writer. And although he technically does kind of the business side of the films we make, he's the person I speak to from the very beginning to the very end, and he's the sounding board, and he's the one who presents ideas as well. You know, he's someone who he's so creative that if I'm stuck, he's someone I can go to, and he'll say, "Well, let's just talk about it and let's see what we come up with." So, which actually led in this film. Um, I follow my instincts when I'm making these films, which is a strange thing to do. I trust the process now, but I don't always know going into it. I don't always know what I'm making. I just
Right.
know what I'm interested in. And one thing that I really knew is that I wanted Christopher Lee to narrate this film somehow.
Ah,
Like, I knew that he had to be the narrator of the story because I
yes.
knew that he was an unreliable narrator, and that's fun, you know. Um,
Yes.
so for a while, what we were going to do is we found some footage that we could have licensed, where we were gonna kind of do the deep fake thing with the face and get a performer in to do his voice, and then, you know, digitally change it to make it look like it was him narrating the film.
Yeah, the deep
And we
fake.
did some tests, but it was really creepy, and it actually it freaked me out because it made it look like we were lying. It made it look like we'd found footage of him actually saying this stuff
It was
Mm.
too
and we were
good.
presenting it as fact.
Mm.
You know, it was
Huh.
it was really strange, and I didn't want to pretend like, you know, I wrote the script to this. It was based on. I mean, the BFI gave me hundreds of interviews with him over the years. You know, stack of documents, and I worked on his reading his volumes of memoirs and autobiographies as well. So and I also his official biographer was consultant on the film as well. So I had enough there, and I used to be a screenwriter, so I had enough there to put a script together of the narration, but I never wanted to pass it off as his words and him saying it.
Mm.
And eventually, like I said, I got kind of stuck. I didn't like the deep fake stuff. I didn't want it to do it voiceover only. And me and Hank had kind of a crazy meeting, and through that we talked about puppets, and he came up with the idea of like a marionette, and it was
Yes.
a crazy idea. But well, then we just were like, I mean, I'd been watching footage with my daughter of marionettes right around that time anyway, and it was kind of, you know, that was in my headspace. And then we found this incredible company, Arch Model Studio, and they do all of Wes Anderson's things. They did all of the Isle of Dogs,
Oh, and the Fantastic Mr. Fox.
and
Oh,
they've done
yeah.
Burton's things. They did all of Frankenweenie, and they were on The Corpse Bride. And we went to them and just kind of said, look, this is what we're thinking. Is this possible?
And
And
Corpse Bride coincidentally had Sir Christopher Lee as the voice of
absolutely,
the clergyman who did the
absolutely.
wedding. That's so funny. You know, it's funny, as a wedding minister myself, I frequently have my brides and grooms ask me to completely recreate the Christopher Lee dialogue of the wedding ceremony. I get asked to do that all the time.
Do you have a Christopher Lee voice?
Well, only when I try, but it's not that good. But
It's good.
there's there are moments when that wedding actually comes back to me, and I have to relive that wedding from Corpse Bride over and over again. But as you were saying, please, I digress. I'm so
Well,
sorry. I
yeah, well,
digress.
we found this company, and the guy who runs the company, Andy Gent, who's an amazingly talented guy,
Mm.
he loved Christopher Lee films. So he just, you know, we were kind of going to him thinking, this might not be something we can afford. This might not be something that's feasible, and he made it work for us. And in fact, he bent over backwards. He even ended up giving us. They've got a studio there and letting us film the puppet scenes in the studio setup they have there, and it was amazing. And they made a custom kind of
Wow.
2-3 foot tall marionette, and it
Wow.
looks just like him. And we got to, I mean, one of the most fun things of the whole film for me is, you know, I got to kind of decide exactly how his hair was good, like which era we were going to go for in terms of the hair. And they made all the clothes. They even made the fabric for the clothes in house.
Oh,
Incredible.
wow.
So
That is
we've made
so great. You
stunning
know,
Christopher.
doesn't it add, I think, and I'm the one person on our show who's always talking about Jim Henson this and that, this and that, but the way that you can use puppetry to add a layer of abstraction might have been exactly the ticket you were looking for, if I'm dialing in. Yeah?
I mean, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where abstraction is exactly the right word.
Hmm.
It was perfect, and we actually got the master puppeteer and his, and we had two puppeteers on it, and they were both Jim Henson graduates. You know, they'd been
All
on
right.
all of this stuff, and they were so creative and incredible. It was such a, I mean, you know yourself, like both of you, like making documentaries is, it's rare that you get to do the kind of creative stuff, you know, in terms of like physically creative like that. Usually
Mhm.
you're interviewing people and you're filming, you know, kind of general footage that you'll use later. It was wonderful to have 2 days on a soundstage with puppeteers, and to be really crazy and experimental. We wanted to do rear projection, and
I love rear projection.
Well,
we used it for a
exactly.
mariachi sequence in our film that was ultimately cut. But yeah, doing rear projection is a unique pleasure. A unique pleasure.
Well, you see, I really wanted to do it, and
Yeah.
because we had such a low budget and such a short amount of time, when we set up the projectors, it just turned out they weren't strong enough. Like it just wasn't going to work. So we just, I just, I didn't know this was going to work, but I just said to the producer, like Hank, I just said, go and buy a TV right now, and we'll take it back tomorrow. But just go and buy a TV, the most powerful, biggest TV you can buy. And we literally just put a TV on the table, connected the laptop into it, used the photos and the archive that we had, and instead of rear projecting, we had the puppeteers stand behind the TV and puppet over the front of the TV, and it
That's
looked
insane.
amazing, you know, really great. And we had we played around with dry ice and we played around with lighting, and we used
Oh,
lighting to make him look younger and older, and we had such fun. It was 2 days of just great fun. It was
I
amazing.
love it.
So
I
did you
love it.
deep fake the
I love it.
voice? Like obviously you said you experimented with the visual deep fake. Now there's AI where that you can do voice duplication. Did
There
you
is. No, we went even better than that. Have you heard of Peter Serafinovich?
uh Darth Maul?
Darth Maul.
No way.
Yeah, we got him in, and he did it.
Oh,
You got
Amazing.
oh,
Darth Maul to voice
that is so
Christopher Lee?
amazing. Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
he was our first choice, and he was absolutely amazing. He's very famous over here as a comedian. He had his own comedy show, and he was on a lot of other kind of shows. And he actually does great work. He's very good at impersonating all of the Beatles. So if you look him up on YouTube, he's done really funny sketches where he plays the Beatles. There's one whole sketch where he fastidiously recreated the rooftop gig, and it's really like the costumes are perfect, the makeup's perfect, the it looks like the camera work and everything, but they're all sat on toilets.
That sounds
That's really what,
hilarious.
He's that comedian.
but
Well,
you can make
this
it.
begs the question now, because we've been having this debate as fans for the last few years with all of the new Lord of the Rings movies and the TV show and stuff. Since you were the first filmmaker to kind of have a hands-on perspective on this, I want to ask your opinion. With new Lord of the Rings coming from Peter Jackson and of course Prime Video's doing their thing, is the technology advanced enough to digitally recreate Christopher Lee's Saruman, or do you think recasting Saruman in these new tales is a better path? Just your opinion.
I think recasting. I think you're never gonna. I've looked at AI a lot, and I've looked at deepfake a lot, but you can't. There are qualities that can't be echoed, And I always think back, and I know it was a few years ago, but I always think back to Rogue One, where they kind of tried to do Peter Cushing, and you just go, but it's not him. And at the end, they did Carrie Fisher, and you just go, but it's not her. It feels off. And I think that it's, I think you can't recreate life, not close up, not that kind of thing. You can't. The human eye is something which can't be replicated because it's the window to the soul. There's everything that's ever happened to someone is kind of behind their eyes. And you
Hmm.
can't just make it look like their eye and go, well, that's their eyes. They're always going to, this CG stuff is always going to be slightly dead behind the eyes. You know, it's great for creating creatures and it's great for creating original things. But if you're trying to replicate a human being, I honestly don't think it'll ever get there. I think there is an anarchy in organic chemistry which will never quite be replicated. You just can't do it. It's everyone's how people hold themselves, how people perform, the way they breathe. Like it's too much to replicate. I just don't think it can be done.
This is what happened with the Polar Express.
Oh,
And
The
That's what
creepiest film of all time.
yeah, that's what happened with also Zemeckis tried, and he made a valiant effort with Jim Carrey doing Scrooge for A Christmas Carol, and there was his Beowulf as well.
Yeah.
There are issues with that uncanny valley area,
I'll
all
tell
very
you.
much
I'll
so.
tell you the one exception that I'll say to that. The one time where I've looked at something which is completely CG and gone, yeah, you got it, is the Planet of the Apes films, the new Planet of the Apes films, and I
Hmm.
think that Caesar in those films, I think that's photorealistic. I mean, that I just that doesn't look CG to me, and I feel like the performance is there, and it feels very real to me. There are CG problems in those films. I don't think they. I always think they get the weight wrong on things. When you see things walking and running, it never quite feels right.
Hmm.
But there are shots in those films where they go right into Caesar's face, and I'm sold. But then
Yeah,
he was real to begin with. Do you know what I mean? Like if so, it's you can do that. You know, it's because
yeah.
he's creation himself, and we're used to seeing him rendered in that way. But I don't think you can replicate something, and maybe they'll come close at some point. And some of that deep fake stuff is very convincing. You know,
Mm.
um, but and performance wise, you couldn't. I think it would be an insult to try and recreate a performance, and to do a digital Saruman would be. I think it
Mhm.
would be a huge insult to Christopher Lee. You know, yeah, I would be very much against
I
that.
I sit very much in agreement with you on that, Jim. Very much in agreement. As we talk about Saruman, let's talk about the one thing that has always bothered me is that the way that the the Screen Actors
Okay.
Guild has treated Sir Christopher Lee, and the fact that Sean Bean has his name on The Return of the King as a shared award for Best Ensemble, but Christopher Lee did not have his name. And that's because of that famous thing that really did upset Christopher. And to my understanding, it was temporarily harmful to the relationship that Peter Jackson had with Christopher Lee, was that in the theatrical release of The Return of the King, his entire final 15 minutes of his character was cut from the film and then reinstated in the extended edition, obviously.
So he doesn't
But
get credit in the theatrical version, and
yeah,
he didn't qualify for any
that's
of the
right.
awards.
That's
That's
exactly right. What do you think about that?
I think it's disgusting. I think it's absolutely shocking. But I expect nothing less from such organizations. I mean, it's bureaucracy, isn't
Uh,
it?
Well, in your research for the documentary, did you get any information, any inclination, or did you see any notes that were of Christopher's reaction to, and maybe more in general, of his lack of awards, of trophies, of Oscars, of
Well,
BAFTAs?
it's interesting. I mean, so to begin with, Peter Jackson goes into that in detail in the documentary. He talks about
Mhm.
what happened when he cut him out, and he talks
Okay.
about Christopher's reaction to it,
Wow.
and how they
Okay.
had to kind of mend their friendship, and how he mended his friendship with him as
Oh,
well.
okay.
Uh,
Okay.
that's in the documentary very much.
That's
In
great.
terms of not getting the recognition, there's a few things going on there. And firstly, Christopher Lee was his career was unlike the career of any other film star for a lot of different reasons. Okay, firstly, he supposedly holds the record for the most film appearances of any actor of all time, which is close to 300 films. Secondly, his career spanned 8 decades, which is insane. And
Wow.
when you think that his career, like early in his career, he was an uncredited guy sword fighting against Errol Flynn, and then he ends his career sword fighting against Yoda. You know, I mean, like it's crazy to think that he went through every phase of cinema. But his approach to his career was a strange one. Okay, so to begin with, the role he was most famous for until very close to his death, until his last decade, was Dracula, was the Hammer Dracula. When you actually watch that film, he's only in that film for 8 minutes.
Wow.
The film is called Dracula. He's in it for 8 minutes. Even when you've seen it, you wouldn't have thought that. You have to be told that because his presence hangs over the entire film. What happened as a result of that, and it was something which he ended up kind of actively promoting, was that people gave him similar roles. And he called these roles short roles. He never called them small roles because they were never small. And what would happen is he was in a lot of films, but he was on screen for a relatively short amount of time. And these roles would always be huge roles. They'd be pivotal roles to the story. I mean, if you think about The Man with the Golden Gun, Scaramanga's not in it a lot. You know, he's all over it. Bond spends the first third of the film looking for the man with the third nipple, you know, but he's not actually in it that much. And that was a hallmark of his career. That was one of the hallmarks. So firstly, it's hard to give awards to someone who is, although a film star, essentially a supporting role. So that's one thing. And the second thing is that he had a workmanlike attitude to his career, which means he didn't and he didn't have an agent who guided him. Okay. He did anything. So he did a lot of terrible films. I mean, he did more bad films than good films. And I'm telling you that as someone who is a fan of his and who has just had to watch most of them. They
It's
are
just through the sheer volume of all of the
sheer
things.
volume.
Yeah.
I don't know what I know he did turn down. It can look like he never turned down a role because he's in some
Right.
really rubbish.
One would think.
But so he cheapened the brand. Okay, so I would argue that between the 70s and the 2000s, or at least the late 90s, he cheapened his own brand. So he wasn't the kind of actor that people were going to give awards to because he wasn't in the kind of films that people give awards
He was
to.
in Gremlins 2 mixing evil laboratory chemicals. And yeah,
And he was
exactly.
wonderful in it. He was
Of course.
incredible in that film.
Oh, yeah, I'm
And
not going to complain about his work in Gremlins 2,
yeah,
but you're mentioning that's the kind of work that he wouldn't be given Oscar recognition
no,
for.
he
Right.
didn't do that kind of thing. And in fact, it wasn't until the late 90s. There's one film that he should have been recognized for, and that's a film called Jinnah, which is a
Oh,
biofilm of
yes.
Jinnah,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
the father of Pakistan.
Hmm.
And I would argue it's Christopher Lee's greatest screen performance. It's the
Yes.
only one of his roles, not the only one, actually, there's a couple, but it's the most significant one of his roles where he's an actor rather than a film star. And you're not going, oh, here's Christopher Lee, because he is lost in that part. The makeup
Hmm.
is incredible and his
Yes.
performance is incredible. He should have been nominated for that many times over.
It is very much akin or an analog to Ben Kingsley and his work in Gandhi. It is an
Absolutely.
analog to that. Yes.
The sad thing is that you had Richard Attenborough directing Gandhi, and Jinnah as a film is not the best film. There's a lot of fantastic scenes in it. There's a lot of great work in it,
Mm.
but it doesn't really hang
Yeah.
together as like the best film. You know, his performance though is stunning, but it barely. You know, I mean, I don't know what the release was on Jinnah, but it didn't make an impact, and that hurt him. And actually, there were political problems with it. There was a lot of outcry about an Englishman playing an Indian,
Yeah.
and he
Yes.
suffered
So,
from that.
so was there any did you find any like a personal uh um regret that that he didn't um get recognition for Lord of the Rings, as far as,
Not for Lord of the
awards?
Rings. You see, the thing that happened was that I'd say from about 1990, I think about 1998. I think it was Sleepy Hollow was the first film that Tim Burton cast him in, and
Hmm.
after that, he was just suddenly. I think people had forgotten he was alive, to be honest. You know, and all of a sudden, he's in Tim Burton's films. He's in the Star Wars films. He's in Lord of the Rings. He's in Hugo Scorsese's film. You know, he's
Yes.
suddenly working with all of the kind of top people kind of the moment. And what happened then was, although he didn't win any awards for Lord of the Rings or for those films, that's when he got all the Lifetime Achievement Awards.
Ah.
And so he got a lot of recognition in that way. And we go into that in the documentary. Like, that all of a sudden he was winning the BAFTA Lifetime Achievement Award. He was getting the BFI Fellowship. He was getting. That's when.
Right.
So that's when the awards kind of really started
Right.
coming.
I
I
think
think
we need to retroactively petition the Screen Actors Guild here in America so that they
you
can
won't give this up.
add his name posthumously to the Return of the King Ensemble Award. Not gonna lie, that's how I personally feel about this.
What
But
when
yeah.
when Ian Holm died, who played Bilbo,
Hmm.
he came out of retirement to reprise his role as Bilbo one last time in the final Hobbit movie. He wanted the final movie of his illustrious career to be Bilbo Baggins.
Yes.
Was there and we obviously we've all seen the appendices of Lord of the Rings and how much uh Christopher Lee loved Tolkien. So is there was he proud to have Battle of Five Armies, The Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings, to be his final performance?
I think, well, technically it wasn't his final performance, which is a shame. I think there's a film called something like Angels in Hampstead or something. He was still making films. He never stopped. He was due to be on set 2 days after he died,
Hmm.
and
Wow.
he always said he wanted to die with his boots on. That was what he would say. He never wanted to give up. He never wanted to stop. He didn't. So he was still employed when he died.
Okay.
So, although they weren't his final films, what I will say and what any kind of Christopher Lee fan would know is they were the highlight of his career because he was obsessed with Tolkien. He was completely obsessed with Tolkien. He read Lord of the Rings when it first came out, chapter by chapter, and he read it every year. He would read the whole of Lord of the Rings cycle once a year. He was completely obsessed with it. When it was announced that Peter Jackson was going to make the films, he basically grabbed hold of his son-in-law, who was to a degree his de facto manager at the time, and basically said, "You have to get me in these films. No matter what, you have to get me in these films." So get online, because Chris Lee was a very early adopter of the internet as well, and using it for his fan base. He was like, "Get online, make sure all the fans are talking about this, and make sure that these people know that I need to be in these films."
Ah.
There's so I think one of the greatest parts of the documentary, which is a part that I didn't direct, and what we did throughout the film, besides the puppet, we used lots of animation and lots of kind of crazy stuff to tell the stories, tell the different chapters, and we got a guy called Dave McKean, who has he's
Dave
kind of
McKean of the
Dave McKean.
Sandman fame, the Dave McKean who
He's a,
does those extraordinary multidisciplinary multimedia covers for all of Neil Gaiman's books and graphic novels. The Dave McKean, ladies
he's
and gentlemen, who got pulled into the Netflix series to do those weird and beautiful multimedia closing credit sequences
I,
for
I
every
think we have a
episode.
fan.
a
I'm
little bit.
I'm about to fall out of my little geek chair right
Oh,
here.
can I tell you from my little geek
Ah,
chair? Can I tell you my Dave McKean story?
please
So,
do. Please
so
do.
about 4 years ago, I wrote a book on Georges Méliès,
Oh, wow.
the kind of
Yeah.
the progenitor of all fantasy and sci-fi cinema.
That one
And
time when Christopher Lee played a benevolent character. That's the one time I remember Hugo as that. But yes, yes, go ahead.
absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
Hugo covers
Yeah.
that. What had happened was I'd found out that Georges Méliès had written an autobiography which had got lost in time.
Oh,
And I
really?
found it had never been translated into English. It had never been published. And I found it, and I did a Kickstarter campaign, and I produced this kind. In fact, I can show you.
Oh. Oh.
Beautiful, beautiful book.
Oh, that is so extraordinary. Look at that.
So it's kind of foil hardback,
That
the
is
long autobiography of Georges Méliès. Um,
perfect.
and so we went all out with it. We kind of I mean, I can kind of flip through, but it's beautifully kind of illustrated and quite
Oh,
see.
wow.
all kinds of stuff, and it's got lots of kind of extra writing and lots of interviews and stuff. And in the middle of it is his autobiography. So I self-published that, and
John, well done,
it's
John. That's
still
so good. It's
thank
so
you.
good.
That's only available through the Georges Méliès. GeorgesMéliès.co.uk is my website. It's never gone. It stayed in the family. It's completely done mail order by me, and that's it. And
Wow.
one day I got an order in from Dave McKean, and I was just like, I saw his name, and I was like, Dave. And I
Wow.
wrote to him because one of my very best friends, who sadly is no longer with us, was a huge Dave McKean fan, and he had introduced me to Dave McKean's work. So I upgraded him to the box set and sent it along, and just sent a note saying, "Look, this is on behalf of my friend Ollie, who introduced me to your work. I was a huge fan, and
That's
I wanted
great.
to know that you were very meaningful to him in his life." And Dave wrote back a lovely note, and he basically said, "If I'd known you were doing a book about Méliès, I would have loved to have worked on it." And he said, "If you ever have a project you think I'd be interested in, just get in touch. Like, don't mess around. Just get in touch. The worst I can say is no," kind of thing.
Right.
And Christopher Lee felt like this would be the one. So
Oh,
got in touch
wow.
with Dave, and he said, "Oh, he was like, I really want to do this, but I'm so busy, I don't think I can do it." And then he said, "But I want to do it." So he's like, "Maybe I could do a short animation for it, And I said, 100%. So I sent him the script, and I kind of noted up probably about 7 sequences that were kind of for the taking. And I said, "Anything you want to do, you choose it." And I said, like, I'll have no role in this at all. Whatever you want to do, you just do it, and it goes in the film. Like, you don't need to tell me what you're doing. All I
Of
can
course.
see, you
Absolute
know,
autonomy.
like,
Dave McKean, I trust
yeah,
you.
it's
Yes.
yours. The script's
Yes.
written. We'd already recorded with Peter. We already had the sound, the Peter's narration for it. So I was just
Wow.
like, as long as you use the narration, whatever you want to do. So he went, okay, and there were a couple of really short ones that I was thinking these are the ones he's going to pick. And he picked the longest one. He picked
Oh.
basically a 7-minute chunk.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and it's the Tolkien chunk. He
No way. That is
Dave
so
McKean
cool.
creates the moment where Christopher Lee met J.R.R. Tolkien.
I am gonna fall down and die right now.
I've
I'm
been
dead.
dying every day on this film.
Don't even.
Instant
I'm
buy,
dying.
folks. This is on Kickstarter right now. You need to
Instant
buy this
purchase.
DVD. If it like this is
Instant purchase
exclusive,
right
right?
now.
It's so
I'm
good.
dying.
And the crazy thing is, I'd said to him, you don't need to consult with me on this. I was expecting, quite honestly, knowing that he didn't have much time, I was expecting kind of a series of kind of slightly moving images, that kind of thing. He sent through an animatic at one point, and I was like, well, this is good enough to put in the film. Like, the animatic was really good. And I was like,
Wow.
how is he gonna do it better than this? He ended up doing a whole studio shoot. He created full masks for people. He created a set. He it's
Oh. Oh
insane.
my God. Oh my God. This is
It's
so exciting. This is so terribly exciting.
yeah.
Um, I can't I can't imagine. I mean, he's a filmmaker himself. I mean, shout out to Mirror Mask, okay?
Love Mirror Mask.
Yes, this strange and delightful little gem of a British fantasy film. Neil Gaiman, Dave McKean, you guys check it out. But there he is trying to overdo it, and I love that he was so engaged with this film, John, that he went that extra mile. That is
It's
delightful to
incredible.
hear.
He and
Delightful.
he composed a score for it as well.
No
He
way.
performed a score for it as well.
I'm dying. This is so cool.
What?
This is so cool.
And
Um,
this is all just from a random book purchase, and wow.
super cool.
I love this
You know what?
industry.
That's amazing. The fact that you're there in England really has helped you a great deal.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
keep thinking, oh, here, I'm surrounded by all the creative people. I can swing my arm and I can hit 10 people who want to work on a project with me in Los Angeles. But there's no way I could get access to the delightful things that you've got right there, and that beautiful, island where you're at in the United Kingdom.
I
You're,
think you just have to be
it's,
open to all of this stuff, you know.
I mean,
Yeah, you just have to
yeah, but
be
you working with the
open.
British Film Institute as well is remarkable access to these resources. And how much did you find yourself leaning into using original recordings of Christopher's own voice, speaking on his own part for himself? Were you able to lean into that to a degree?
No, there wasn't. So one of the problems with the British Film Institute, which is an amazing kind of organization, is that so they hold um, one of the largest archives in the world of filmed material going
Yeah,
Mhm.
film. Yeah.
back to original negatives to films to film stock to tapes to everything.
Mhm.
Uh, Part of the problem is that they don't own the copyright on all of that.
Yeah.
So although
Ah,
they protect it and sometimes restore it, they don't
right.
technically own it. And the other problem is that because we have had a horrible right-wing government here for the last decade who have continually cut arts funding, although they have this stuff, they don't have the kind of the budget or the means to digitize it all,
Digitize
you
it.
know.
Yeah.
So it's quite hard. Like what was great for us with the BFI was going through firstly the special collection, because they hold Christopher Lee's own scrapbooks of his own career, like written in his hand, compiled by him. So
Wow.
that was amazing to go through. But they've got a huge the library there has, you know, every interview he's ever done. So there was lots of information on him. They also had some good we certainly got some good images from them, and we got some great kind of not necessarily footage of him, but footage of the time, you know, times which we
Yeah.
can into the
That's
film.
great. Well,
So we didn't really have that kind of archive of his voice as such
Hmm.
to hand. It's something I would have considered. I would have considered if he'd ever. I don't know why he didn't record an audiobook of his biography. If he'd ever done that, I would have considered kind of using that. And
Right.
if he had ever, if we'd had access to a lot of interviews with him that I could have cut around in that way,
Mhm.
I would have considered that. But to be honest, I like it the way we've done it. I'm really happy with the kind of the approach that we ended up taking.
it sounds amazing. I'm happy, for getting Dave McKean and interviewing Peter Jackson. Like, I'm a big fan. I mean, separately from that, I'm a big fan of what I like to call the found footage documentary. And the best example I could give is Marlon Brando's "Listen to Me, Marlon." It's a
Absolutely.
documentary on
Oh yeah.
Marlon, but
Oh yeah.
told by Marlon. Like, in his own words, they found every piece of recorded media he'd ever done, and he happened to narrate his life, his whole life. So I'm personally, I'm a fan of uh, no talking heads, just basically a documentary told in real time uh, from found footage. But this totally makes sense that there just
I,
isn't,
I,
there wasn't
I mean,
enough.
I'll tell you the thing that I ended up doing, which kept it interesting for me and made it a film that was really kind of worth making, is that his autobiography is amazing. It's a really well written book, and it's surprisingly kind of self deprecating. The
Hmm.
reason I wanted to make the film, the inspiration, the original impetus, was that I saw the This Is Your Life that you mentioned earlier. And if you watch that carefully, he is having the worst time. It looks like he's about to have a nervous breakdown. And the reason for that is that he is someone who liked to control his own narrative.
Mhm.
He liked to be in control of this kind of thing. And actually, the reason that we didn't get to interview his widow or his daughter, who have both been supportive of the project in different ways, was that he made them promise him before he died that they wouldn't do interviews about him. So yeah, so
Ah.
he was very controlling about his narrative. So what I've done with the film, which I really like and is fun and also kind of makes you think and brings him to life in a really interesting way is that he narrates his story. He tells you his story. But the talking heads, who are all people who knew him, everyone who's a talking head is someone who had a relationship with him in this film. They kind of gently contradict what he says. So
Really?
he gives the official line. I've got his words in. He would not be upset with the script that I wrote, you know. And I actually had arguments with Jonathan Rigby, with the consultant, who was Lee's official biographer and who knew him well, and he would say to me, "This isn't true. This is a lie," and I'm like, "Yeah, but it's his truth, and it's the truth he wanted in his story. So I'm putting it in there." And I said, Jonathan is interviewing the film. I said to him, if you want to contradict him in the interview, do it, you know, and he does. But I'm presenting it as his truth. So you've got Lee as the unreliable narrator himself, and then I wouldn't say they don't humiliate him and they don't make him look stupid. Actually, they add to his humanity by filling out their perception of his truth, and it's lovely.
Well, okay, so
lovely.
Since you've been head deep in all of this and you've gotten those stories, I've pulled up one of our most popular tweet threads from 2018 that goes through point by point the biggest legends of Christopher Lee. So rapid fire, can you say just true or false? I'll just go through them and you say true or false.
Okay. Can I just say before you do this that you should look up, Jonathan Rigby's also done a top 10 of the biggest lies about Christopher Lee, and it'd be really interesting to see if those square up.
Okay.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. So his full name and title is Sir Christopher Frank Carradine Lee, CBE, CSU, Knight Commander of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, Commander of the Venerable Order of St. John, Commander of the Order of Arts and Letters by the French government.
Apart from the last two, it's definitely true. I haven't heard the last two. They're likely true, but I the last two. But everything else completely true.
Okay. He's in Guinness Book of World Records for most screen credits.
I'm not sure that's true. He always claimed that, but I couldn't see it in the Guinness Book of Records. So I don't think it's actually in the Guinness Book of Records, but I think it's a legitimate claim.
I love that he encouraged this mythology making of himself. Anyway,
that's the funniest thing about it is a lot of this stuff is out there because he didn't deny it when it was presented.
I love it.
He holds the record for the tallest leading actor. He stood 6'5".
Tallest leading actor. I mean, I don't know what record that would be. I can't believe that's true. I think that I can't believe he's very tall, but I can't believe that's true. I don't know.
Okay. He's also
until Peter Mayhew came along.
Well,
hardly star.
Leading actor, tallest leading actor.
Okay,
but,
well,
who
Chewbacca
that?
could lead anytime.
That's
sorry.
not. Yes.
It's
all right.
It's quite possibly true. I'm trying to think of anyone who would be a lead actor who would be taller, but yeah.
So we don't know. Next one. He has the record for starring in the most films with a sword fight.
I could believe it. I mean,
17.
Again, what is the record? Like, where is this record?
17 movies. I don't know where. Like, we can't.
I'll say this: there's no way he was only in 17 movies with a sword fight. There's no way, because you do 3 Star Wars films, 3 Musketeer films. You're on to 6 already. There's no way he only. 17.
There must be
6
many
Lord
more.
of the Rings.
Yeah, would those count as sword fights? I don't
think he didn't touch a sword once in those 6 movies. Come on.
Okay. Moving on. James Bond exists because of Christopher Lee. He is Ian Fleming's cousin.
Here we go. Okay. He was Ian Fleming's cousin. That's true. By marriage. I think it was his stepfather's sister's son. I think that's right. And they were close, and they played golf together. Where it gets murky, this is Jonathan Rigby's top falsehood, which is that he was the inspiration for James Bond. He certainly had a career in the Secret Services, and he certainly knew Ian Fleming. And when it was put to him, He never denied it, but supposedly it's not true. Supposedly he wasn't a direct influence.
Move on. Christopher Lee was recognized as being the most connected actor in the world in 2008 by Guinness Records. He connects to virtually any actor in 2.5 steps, beating Kevin Bacon.
Oh, of course he beats. But his career was 5 decades longer than Kevin Bacon's career. So, yeah, that's definite. I mean, he was in so many films with so many people that
All right, true.
It's 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, isn't it?
Yeah.
I would argue that Christopher Lee is only ever 3 degrees away from anybody.
I think, and Guinness World Records says 2.59.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
that makes perfect sense. I mean, if you just look at the list of directors he worked with, I mean, he worked with everyone. He worked with Orson Welles. He worked with Billy Wilder. He worked with Steven Spielberg, Scorsese, John Landis, Joe Dante, Peter Jackson. I mean, you know, he worked with everybody. So yeah, definitely.
One quick question before Justin jumps in. Was there ever a Venn diagram overlap with Howell and Pressburger? Because I'm a big fan of the Archer Studios. I'm a huge fan of Black Narcissus and the Red Shoes and things like that. But I was wondered if there was ever any crossover with Christopher Lee working on any of their projects.
There was. He did something with them. He did something with at least Michael Powell, I think.
Oh, okay. All right. Just curious.
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure.
All right. Well, so that at least it exists. That's a good overlap. At least it exists. Good.
Okay. Christopher Lee is descended from Emperor Charlemagne.
Absolutely. And that was his favorite claim to fame. There is an argument that everyone is descended from Charlemagne. But he had a direct tendency, which we track in the film. And in his 90s, he broke the record as the oldest ever performer to get onto the Billboard charts with his heavy metal album, Charlemagne.
Christopher Lee is related to the Confederate General Robert E. Lee.
I don't think that's true.
Okay.
I don't understand how it would be because he came down through Italian aristocracy, and his family was only in Australia and Italy and London. And I don't think there was a point where his family went. And no, I don't think that's true. I certainly not come across that.
Christopher Lee it nearly married into royalty with the crown equerry to the King of Sweden.
Yes, that's very true. Yes, yeah.
Oh my!
Came very close, and instead he married the girl whose father owned, I think it's the Kronenberg Brewery.
Oh,
Christopher Lee.
He almost married into Sweden. He almost married into the Swedish royal family. That is true.
Wow. Christopher Lee was, when he was a young actor, he was voted one of the sexiest men alive.
That's true, and also that was the first instance of that coming from a kind of horror icon as well, because his performance of Dracula was a really kind of sexual performance, and that sparked a whole unexpected thing. He, before that, and you think about Bela Lugosi's Dracula, he wasn't sexy. It was before that you really did have monsters and kind of creatures. And I would argue that he moved that into a more actorly space. His first monster role was Frankenstein's monster in the first Hammer horror film, and his performance in that film is incredible. He plays it for real. He plays it as if what someone would actually be like if you took an old damaged brain and put it into a kind of patched together body. It's a very melancholy, disturbing performance. And then when he played Dracula, he was the first one to bring sexuality into that role. I mean, like Bram Stoker's Dracula was an old man. He wasn't what vampires have become. And I would argue that the whole sexy vampire thing, I think that came directly from Christopher Lee. So yeah.
So you heard it here, folks. You can thank Christopher Lee for the success of Twilight.
Absolutely.
There was, well, I mean, there was, yeah, I can
we don't
definitely
need to expand on that.
I definitely see that Frank Langella was stepping into that space that Christopher Lee had created, with it being a sexually charged Dracula who was a presence of of that kind of threat, not just a horror threat, but a sexual energy that was different. And yeah, Frank was stepping into those shoes, but only because Christopher Lee had walked there first. Yeah.
And you know, one of the things that I found interesting making the film was that people think that he was cast as Dracula because he had played Frankenstein for Hammer 2 years earlier, you know. And actually, the truth of the matter is that part was because Peter Cushing was the star back then. Christopher Lee was basically an unknown. So when they cast him as Frankenstein, he didn't become famous as Christopher Lee playing Frankenstein's monster. It was a Peter Cushing film. He was the monster. Everyone thinks he did Frankenstein, so they cast him as Dracula. But actually, what happened is in between those two films, he did a film version of A Tale of Two Cities, which had a huge cast, like Dirk Bogarde, really interesting cast, and he played the Marquis de Saint-Evremont, who was the bad guy, and he was a kind of evil aristocrat, and it was because of that they cast him as Count Dracula. So you know that and there's a whole sexiness power kind of issue with that kind of role. So really that's where that came from.
Speaking of casting, that was my next bullet point. Again, true or false? Christopher Lee took a role in TV's terrible New Adventures of Robin Hood as a wizard, just so he had proof and a credit for playing a wizard to get Lord of the Rings.
I've not heard that. I've not heard that.
I have not heard that either.
I mean, all right.
You know what I will say is that there's a very moving story in the film that Peter Jackson tells about Christopher Lee's first day on set. But one thing I will say is Christopher Lee never understood that he was Christopher Lee. He never understood that top filmmakers would want to work with him because they respected him and because they respected his legacy. So when he wanted to be on Lord of the Rings, I think he felt on the back foot. I don't think he ever thought, I'm Christopher Lee, so I'm born for this role. You know, I don't think that was ever in his mind. I think he considered himself incredibly lucky to have got that part, and he respected Peter Jackson hugely.
Wow. All right, next one. Lee was a world champion fencer.
Yes. Yep. He was one of the best.
Lee was a world-renowned opera singer.
Okay. I will before we go on to that one about the fencer. The really cool thing is John Landis in the film says that whenever anyone met Christopher Lee, he'd hold up one crooked finger and say, "See that? Errol Flynn did that to me." Because Errol Flynn was a terrible swordsman, and Christopher Lee was a wonderful swordsman. And Errol Flynn, the first film he made with him, chopped his finger with the sword, and he forever had a crook in his finger because of it. What was the second one?
Opera singer.
Okay, so here we go. This is actually a really important one. Okay?
I love that each of these have a story. Like you can't just say true or false with Christopher Lee. It's so much deeper.
I could say true or false, but there's so much more cool stuff to say. Not true. He was not a world-renowned opera singer, but the truth is, he wanted more than anything in the world to be a world-renowned opera singer. He had never intended to be an actor. He fell into acting in the most ridiculous way. We tell the story in the film. I'm not going to spoil it now. It's really funny how he became an actor.
Okay,
but he wanted to be an opera singer. That's all he wanted to do. His whole life was to be an opera singer, and it broke his heart that he wasn't. And there was one point in his life where he could have been, and the Norwegian National Opera offered him a place, but to take the place he would have had to fund himself for a year in training, and at that point in his life he couldn't afford it, and he regretted it for the rest of his life. All he wanted to be was an opera singer.
My goodness, the road not taken.
Yeah, the film is very much about that kind of thing, and we deal a lot with his regrets and a lot with his insecurities.
In so small an act can the hand of destiny be changed, to quote a character from Neil Gaiman. So I had to do that. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah. Christopher Lee spoke 6 languages.
I think he spoke more. I think he spoke more than
more than 6.
Okay.
Wait. Italian, English, French. Let's start with the big 3. Russian. Okay.
God, what else?
Spanish.
Italian.
I did that first. Italian,
He's
English, French, Russian,
Swedish.
Swedish.
What do they speak in Switzerland? He lived in Switzerland for 10 years.
It depends
German,
upon
Swede.
what region. You get a little bit of Tyrolean mix of
German.
Italian
He
and
could speak German. He could speak fluent German.
German. Okay, there you go.
Uh,
It's a bit French mix in Switzerland.
yeah. He could
Spanish?
speak. He had a natural flair for languages from when he was very young, and in fact, one of the most interesting things about his career is that he basically spent a decade as a tax exile from Britain, living in
Hmm.
Switzerland, working in Europe, and he made loads of films in their indigenous tongue, and there are films that that have never been released in America or Britain because they were filmed in German and Italian and Swedish, and he was speaking in those languages. So yeah,
Wow. All right,
Wow.
next one. Christopher Lee was an expert golfer.
completely true. And it dominated his life. He the 10 years he spent in Hollywood, which I would say are his worst years in terms of the films he made. His truly awful films were made while he lived in Hollywood. He didn't care. He got to play every golf course there. He had the best golfing buddies, and he had the time of his life. Golf. He always took every job he did seriously, always, and he always gave a great performance. But that was his work, and in his life, he loved golf. Yeah.
All right. He was an official British spy.
Wow. Here we
Off the
go.
record.
Well,
Off the record.
I would say official is the word which is the question, because the British government will never acknowledge what he did during and after the war. And there are many stories and many legends, and we certainly go into it a bit in the film. I'm not going to spoil it because it's worth watching the film to find out certain things he did, but there are certain things which will never be revealed.
Fair.
Oh my goodness.
His
A
true
real
hobby.
man of mystery. A
Well,
real man of mystery.
you think about it, he was someone who had been in the Air Force, and
Yeah.
someone who could speak that many languages, and someone who had an ability to act. So he was someone who could be sent behind enemy lines.
And he was
Oh my
sexy. Like
oh my
he
And
could
it's sexy.
seduce.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow.
Never underestimate the power of a good yeah. Anyway, next one. His true hobby was executions. He had a weird, morbid fascination with executions, and he is in the
What?
crowd of the last guillotine in Paris in 1939.
So this is true. This is all true. So he didn't know what he was going to witness. He was taken by a man he was staying with in France at the time. He was whisked off one morning, and he didn't know where he was going, and he found himself in this town square, and suddenly he's watching the last ever guillotining in France. He watched this serial killer get his head chopped off. He was a very emotional youth. He was very naive and young, and seeing that happen disturbed him greatly, but also fascinated him. And yeah, he developed a lifelong obsession with murders and with executions, and he owned. This is awful. He was friends with Pierpoint, who was the last hangman in Britain, Britain's most famous hangman.
Oh my goodness.
And Pierpoint would give him nooses from prominent executions.
Oh my lord.
So,
This
That's
is an obsession.
such
yeah,
a strange side hobby.
there's a very funny section in the film, and I don't want to spoil the joke, but there's a very funny section in the film where we look into that, where his son-in-law talks about that. It's so funny. Yeah.
Wow.
And then, of course, the final true false for today. Christopher Lee met J.R.R. Tolkien in more than just a "can I have your autograph" situation.
Yes, he did. And again, I'm not gonna spoil it because it's the Dave McKean chapter of the film, so you want to watch it and you want
I'm dying that you got Dave involved.
to.
Dying.
Well,
It's so
I'm
great.
telling you guys, just with this rapid fire, this whole conversation has been amazing. But this rapid fire true false thing, I am dying to watch this now. And I imagine everybody watching like this is a must see, must watch. And as you were saying, DVD, Blu-ray is the way to watch it. You've got bonus features. A lot of people, everybody's tight on a budget. Most people now are like, oh, wait until it's streaming. But you purposely started the show saying this might not be on streaming. Like this is the only way to watch it.
It's going to be on streaming. I don't know about America yet. We haven't sold the American rights yet. It's going to be on Sky in the UK in October at Halloween. And it's actually it aired on some TV station in Australia already. I think SBS might have shown it. So it will make it out there in streaming, but for Lord of the Rings fans, we're going to put like the whole Peter Jackson interview in special features. We're gonna put most of the of all of the we're going to put as much of the interviews as we can fit on a Blu-ray disc.
I love that. I love unexpurgated raw interview footage. I love it. Love that stuff.
And you can't, as you guys know, like when you're making a documentary, you lose so much of the great stuff because you can't fit a whole anecdote in, a big long shaggy dog story, or one of the things they told you is wonderful, but it just doesn't fit anywhere. It just doesn't kind of get to the pacing of the film. So we're going to put all of that stuff in there. And I mean, you can also, through the Kickstarter, we've put a level for every price, basically. So the lowest level, which is like kind of £10, we're going to show it. We're going to do a live online screening where you'll get to watch it with us at a set time, and we'll do a Q&A afterwards. The next level up is download to own, so you can keep it forever. The next one is Blu-ray, where you start getting all the extra features. Then there's a deluxe Blu-ray package where you also get like amazing kind of prints. There's a guy called Graham Humphreys, who's a very famous cinema poster artist over here. He's doing a special portrait exclusively for this campaign, and you'll get a signed print of that. Get a poster, you get a print by a guy called Johnny Greenteeth, who's an amazing folk artist. And then you work up to the big box set, and which comes in a coffin. And the beautiful thing that's going to be in the big box set is that the guys from Arch Model Studios who made the Christopher Lee puppet, they're making a Christopher Lee death mask, like a 3D death, which you'll get as part of that box set. They're doing it in-house. The actual people who made it, who worked on all those great films, it's going to be the only way you can get one. It's only going to be in this box set. We've got a new book of writing with Jonathan Rigby writing a new piece, and BFI's Joe Botting's writing a new piece. Dave McKean art cards are going to be in there.
Oh wow!
Tons of stuff. We just announced today, because we've moved on to the second stretch goal now, and if we get to 50,000, we're going to put a free model kit in a free paper model kit in every box from the deluxe Blu-ray up, of a kind of Christopher Lee diorama by this amazing guy called Hey Kids Rock and Roll, who makes these really funky kind of like paper sculptures that you kind of, when you're a kid, you get those things where you cut them out and you fold them up. And stuff. So he makes those based on 60s and 70s things. So he's going to do an exclusive Christopher Lee one for us.
Oh, that's so cool.
There's so much.
You can get the Blu-ray, ladies and gentlemen, for £30. It's only 39 American dollars. That's nothing. You were going to spend that anyways.
You ship to America?
I mean,
there's all over the world.
Oh yeah, you've already converted. Like right there on the Kickstarter, it says both pounds and American dollar right there.
And the other thing to remember is we're not going to put this out in the shops. This is only going to be available through. We'll probably still, the Blu-ray itself will probably do mail order the same way we do the Méliès kind of stuff until it runs out. We'll do one run of them, and we'll sell off the surplus that way. But the box set itself, we're really going to make as many as people order. And so when we say collector's edition, we mean collector's edition. If you miss it first time round, these are the kind of things which, if they even come up on eBay, you're looking at hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So if you want to make hundreds of dollars, you can buy 2 copies and keep running eBay them. But it's, at the moment, it looks like the run's going to be as low as 500 of the box set, and that's a real collector's edition. So
wow, that's delightful.
Well, John, this is just an incredible package. You have it sounds like you have an amazing documentary, like, and this conversation today has been the biggest tease of like, oh my gosh, I need to know the whole story, and I need to see Dave McKean's visual take on it. And
I'm so excited about this.
as we close up, I just wanted, I wanted to mention that, the OneRing.net, we were founded in 1999. We're just now celebrating our 25th anniversary as a fan community for Tolkien. I mean, what on the internet still exists after 25 years? We're older than Boing Boing. We're older than like Google. We're YouTube.
Outlived Ask Jeeves.
Yeah, yeah.
Older than
But one
Ask
of
Jeeves. My God.
so we've
That's
been, but
funny.
lately we've been going through the One Ring archives, and we found so many photos of Christopher Lee interacting with fans, coming to fan events, being so giving in his time and his attention. And then we found, this must have been right after the last Hobbit movie, and we found a video that I think we're going to post, or we might have just posted on YouTube, of Christopher Lee personally thanking the OneRing.net. I mean, and he shouts us out, and he's just sat on his couch next to his stack of records of Charlemagne records and stuff. And I feel that, as much as fans supported, oh man, my voice is cracking because like I miss him, but like the fans supported Christopher Lee all the way through, and we felt the love back.
And he had an issue his whole life because he grew to hate his association with Dracula, and he grew to be very frustrated by people associating him with that role endlessly. And one of the gifts that Lord of the Rings and the fan base gave him was something completely different, which he was very proud to be associated with. So I think his interactions with Lord of the Rings fans was incredibly meaningful to him.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful to know. And I have spent many an hour interviewing all these wonderful luminaries in the world of Tolkien and fantasy authors and filmmakers. But it is my one regret, I must say. And Jon, I'm thrilled that you were the man to do it, and to do it so exceptionally well, to put this actual story together of his life, because he was the one fellow that I never got to sit down and chat with. And but I gotta say, this is very exciting to see the performance of your film in the Kickstarter ecosystem. And there's a few more days left at the time of this broadcast, so you folks dive on in and check out The Life and Deaths of Christopher Lee. That right there is Jon Spira, who is writer, director, and man about town, who has joined us for a wonderful chat. This has been a great sit down with you, and you're so generous with your time. Thank you, Jon, for being with us.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. Like I say, it's like allowing me access to the fan base, to the Lord of the Rings fans, is a great gift for me and for the documentary, and I really appreciate that, guys. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I actually kind of feel a small note of personal pride that TheOneRing.net and that the fan community that we have, which feels like family, was able to give something to Christopher Lee and to help transform perhaps that prism through which that he viewed himself, by getting that bounce back from the fandom. Because everyone around the world has said one major thing, that the best thing that Peter Jackson did was his casting choices. And it all started from there, and the whole pyramid was built from that cornerstone at the top of how brilliantly casted all of his films were. And Christopher Lee is an inimitable part of that forever. Film history forever. And that's what we love about film. Film is forever. It really is. It's so great. Brother, it's so great to have you. Thank you. Best of luck with your endeavor. And everybody get your copy of The Life and Deaths of Christopher Lee. It's been very exciting conversation. And again, you're welcome, Jon. Come and join us here at TheOneRing.net anytime, and we'll have more good conversations. Please.
So much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Well done.